Hello everybody. We are going to start the first webinar of today of the gvSIG festival. The title of this presentation is Evaluating Temporal Changes to Water Bodies in Medak in India. And the speaker is Gautam Golapalli. He's from India. He's the managing director of Kainos Geospatial Technologies company. And its supporter is Ajay Kumar Mulakala from the same company. So I'm going to change the script to Gautam computer, so you can start now.
Yeah. Thank you, Mario. Good day, everyone. Yeah. So I'll be talking about how temporal changes are affecting the populations in India. We have taken a district as our study area. Is my presentation visible? Yeah. So this is our study area. So we are talking about a newly created state called Telangana, where we have taken a district named Medak. Why we have taken this district is this district falls in a very frequent drought-prone area. As you can see this map of India, these yellow parts are droughts affected, and this is picked from a news article. And these years after 2000, droughts have become very frequent in central India or western India because of El Nino effect, and sometimes there are very heavy thunder showers because of La Nina. So we'll see how over a period of time things have changed and how population growth has affected this area, the study area, which is Medak, as you can see from the map. So coming to demographic profile of Medak, Medak has grown very fast because it is very near to a big urban agglomeration called Hyderabad, which has around 7 million population. So that effect has, because it is an adjoining district of this urban agglomeration, the urban areas which are bordering to this are growing very fast. So there is a 89% increase in urban population in the last decade, whereas the overall population increase is 13%, which is also a very big number. And population density is 312 persons per square kilometer. For a rural district like Medak, predominantly rural district like Medak, 312, which is almost 3 times that of population density of Spain, is pretty huge. So any change in climate will affect huge number of population. So as I shown in this map, these kinds of frequent droughts are frequent. There is an extreme also where there are frequent heavy showers, short spell heavy showers that are happening also. So this global El Nino effect, which is in Pacific and Indian Ocean kind of a thing, is affecting the central India. So we've taken a piece of central India to see how this affects the population. Also last year, that is 2015, there was a very severe drought in this area. So all the water bodies have shrunken in size. We'll see how this happens. In 1995, December, that is some 20 years back, the scenario, the water availability was pretty good actually. As you can see in this image, this is a reservoir called this is on a small river called Manjira, and there are lots of lakes as you can see. Apart from this reservoir, because this being almost a flat terrain, there are man-made tanks which have been there culturally, playing culturally a very important role in agriculture and festivals of the country. And also these new dams and modern technological inventions are also there in Medak. So in 1995, this is overlaid on open aerial, or the open aerial shows this like a desert, but that is not the case actually. So from December, if we come to March in 1995, we can see that there is seasonal variation in the uh, water bodies. So this is taken from Landsat imagery, and then using gvSIG, we have extracted water bodies from using unsupervised classification. Uh, so this seasonal variation we all understand. So qualitatively we can see that from December to March there has been drastic change in the water body uh, surface water presence in this area. Now I have plotted this as a graph on the administrative boundaries. So these are what we call uh, divisional boundaries, or we, in local language we call them talukas. So these areas, there are around 8 taluks in Medak district, where we can see because of this reservoir, which is Manjira, uh, the western part of the district has a good surface water availability, ranging which is more than 10%, whereas the eastern part is having lesser surface water availability, which is understandable because of the presence of a major reservoir. But then in summer, all of the water is drained out. Uh, the water availability drastically comes down. Uh, Almost 10% decreases there in all the administrative boundaries. But then this the summers are pretty severe in this region, going up to 42 degrees in 42 degrees Celsius in summer. So that variation is understandable, and water problems, availability of water is also low. So for domestic usage, there is always a challenge in India, in southern parts of India, for domestic water availability. But then people are accustomed to this kind of less water shortage in summer months. But then what has happened in 2015 is, even in winter we didn't have much of water. As you can see, this map, the water bodies extracted from November 2015 Landsat, is having water which is less than 1995 March water. So in 1995 March, that is summer of 1995, had more water than winter of November 2015. And then in April, the situation was very similar also. So there has been a year-long no rain period in this area, resulting in severe stress on water bodies and water availability. And then given the statistics of population, these numbers, where 13% population growth is there, and water in 10 years has decreased so much, then you can imagine the pressure on the natural resources that are there in this region. The effects of groundwater depletion and the desalination of water bodies, or even the bore wells, drying up bore wells, and then given that we are a rice-eating nation, if the water is saline, then all this agriculture produce and food security issues come up because of this kind of droughts. So if we see this map with the graphs shown on this, is very similar to again the summer 1995 map. So both April and November were having uh, are having a very similar map. Luckily, there were unseasonal rains in February or so last year, and so April we had some of the water bodies with some water. So it was not, and you can see the almost the surface water in Siddipet, Medak, Rajwell, this eastern part of the district, almost didn't have any of the water bodies visible from the satellite. So you can imagine the surface groundwater depletion in these areas, because all these three mandal headquarters, or the headquarters, administrative headquarters, have seen rapid increase in urbanization in the last 10 years. So the pressure on groundwater resources is very high in these areas. Now we just try to plot water availability with population from 1995, and we have taken one La Nina year, that is 2002, where we had heavy rainfall. So 2002 September, as you can see, has had lot of water, surface water available, almost more than 350 thousand square kilometers. So we calculated a ratio of total population versus surface population. In 2002, the ratio was 7,251. Say there is a resource, water resource is some, if we assume that water resources are constant, then 7,250 people had access to the same resource. And now in 2015, almost more than 54,000 people are depending on the same resource, or probably if there is a drought, there is a reduced availability of water. So there is a double effect on this. One is the population is increasing day by day, and then the second thing is, instead of water remaining constant or constant with the seasonal variations, the water resources are depleting day by day. Uh, so especially if there is a drought kind of a thing like last year, then there is heavy depletion of groundwater, whereas population is too high. So both the availability of food in rural areas and availability of water for domestic purposes get seriously affected because of this scenario. Now, we have seen the challenges that are there in the climatic changes or unseasonal unseasonal or what they call the unexpected seasonal variations because of El Nino kind of a thing. Uh, we have seen the challenges that the population living in these areas is facing. Now, as per Indian government uh, criteria or policy, domestic consumptions per day per person should get at least 200 liters of water, whereas some other studies show that the cultivation of major crop, that is paddy, in these areas requires 3,000 to 5,000 liters based on the variety per kg production. This needs 3,000 to 5,000, whereas jowar, what we call, that is sorghum or great millet, as it is called elsewhere, requires around 600 liters per kg. So jowar or sorghum is mainly consumed in rural areas, whereas paddy or wheat, which is equivalent to this, is consumed more in urban areas and used more in processed foods, or by the general urban population, which is on the move always, consumes more of paddy or wheat on day-to-day basis. So on water consumption, these are the statistics that are available. So on one hand, there is a challenge of water availability versus population. On the other hand, there is a water consumption part. And now, what are the consequences of drought in these scenarios? One case is, so when there is a drought, there is less water available, which leads to a bad yield. That is uh, obvious scenario sometimes when we take water intensive crops like paddy, which need high water and continuous wet fields. So when there is no water, probably the farmers don't get the yield, or the yield that they get would be very low. And then this bad yield leads to bad rural economy. So there could be, when there is less water, the acreages come down, the uh, fields that are under cultivation will come down. So there is availability of work in the rural areas, drastically affects the rural services like agriculture labor, or the people who drive the tractors for cultivation and irrigation. So those people find it difficult to get the job in rural areas when there is a bad agriculture economy, when there is a drought kind of a thing. So these people in Medak especially, because they are very near to Hyderabad, which has around 7 million people, they find it very easy to migrate, or are forced to migrate to Hyderabad. So they find in urban areas, they find instead of the agriculture labor might become a household labor in a city, and then the people who are drivers or mechanics in the rural areas become drivers or mechanics in the urban areas. So they tend to migrate, and then that leads to increase in urban population. But then in urban areas, there is a more tendency to have processed food, uh, to consume more and more processed food, and that leads, which again are dependent on water intensive crops like wheat or rice in these areas, which again lead to more water consumption, thus leading to less water. So this is a kind of a vicious cycle which a drought can trigger. So a drought can trigger a bad rural economy. Bad rural economy might drive the migration, which increases the urban population, and then which again leads to more and more stress on the rural resources that are there, especially water in the rural areas. Now, what if there is a reverse migration? In what kind of a situation there will be a reverse migration? Can good yield in rural areas lead to reverse migration? So is something that we have to think of. But then this kind of reverse migration is a very rare scenario in Indian economy. People, once they come to urban areas and settle, because of the facilities that are there in the urban areas, they find it very difficult to go back, like in any other place in the world, to a rural area and then again settle in an agriculture-based economy. So even a good yield will not help reverse migration. And then because most of the people who migrate are not landowners, but then they are people working in rural service sector who find it easier to work in urban service sector. So even a reverse migration in a good yield scenario might not help in consumption or better management of water. So now the probably the better result would be to uh, reduce the processed food consumption, go for less water intensive crops, which the government is now trying to look for. So there is a comprehensive approach by Indian government. This year they have realized the importance of groundwater, and surface water. So they have increased 85% of budget from last year to this year in groundwater management. So there'll be more and more check dams coming up in India, and more bunds, farm ponds kind of structures coming in the in most of the rural areas in India. Also, the local state government is spending around $2 billion in next 5 years on watersheds and then regenerating lakes, and then building bunds across lakes, and then also bending structures like sluices there and all these things on the lakes. Also, they are planning to come up with water grid model. The governments like other governments like Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat have tried creating something called water grid, where areas having excessive water, water is diverted from those areas to places where there is more demand for water. So this kind of comprehensive infrastructure projects are coming up because the water is becoming, in a highly populated country like India, water is becoming more and more precious, more and more scarce every day. And then this is one part where management of water itself is in the front row. The second, as I pointed out in this slide, there is increase in processed food consumption. There are more and more water intensive crops in India. So because of change in socioeconomics over the past 20-25 years, consumption of sugar, and then consumption of rice, consumption of wheat has grown many-fold in India. But then the traditional crops like millets or sorghum or whatever millets like foxtail millet or little millet, those consumptions have reduced. So they are less water intensive. Say for example, foxtail millet, the local varieties, some of them consume only 200 liters of water per kg, whereas rice consumes around 2,000, 3,000 to 5,000 liters per kg. So, and nutrition value is definitely better in millets than in rice. Though the yield of millet is very low when compared to rice, but then the pressure that they create on water resources is very less. So millets are probably more water friendly crops. So this year government is trying to spend around $500 million for organic farming, especially promoting the millet cultivation, so that we don't get these kinds of scenarios where we see barren lands and very water resources heavily consumed because of ever growing urbanization. And then probably these ratios would go back to these numbers, so that there's water availability overall increases. Coming back to so how did we use gvSIG in this? So we took open data available from NASA Landsat, and then in band 5, this is how we were seeing in the near infrared band. Water bodies were clearly visible, and then unsupervised classification in gvSIG's extent library was working pretty well. We also experimented out creating another band combination with blue and near infrared bands, where we got this kind of output for a combination of blue and infrared. We came up with something called water index, where we came up with an index comprising of blue and near infrared rays. So from this, we did an unsupervised classification. Uh, came out with clusters having water bodies, and then we vectorized those clusters, filtered out other things, came up only with water, and then we did a spatial joining with administrative boundaries present to present this kind of a map. So this is an output of unsupervised classification of Landsat imagery, and this is a special output of spatial join with these water bodies present in those administrative areas. Now, coming to the study, how does this study help? First, this is probably we have used only open source and only open data in this, which is available for any one of us. And then this can be demonstrated. This we have demonstrated to local governments to show the utility of these tools and data sets that are available in open domain to find out and assess these kinds of challenges in quantitative manner. So we all know the variations of that happen qualitatively, but then these kinds of tools, especially gvSIG, which is just powerful spatial calculators, it has almost everything that is available in spatial domain can be done with gvSIG desktop. So this will be very useful for demonstrating things to local government. So and then we are working with local government in understanding how these water bodies change over time. And then second thing, we can also, in continuation with this, we can also help in prioritizing areas based on agriculture practices that are available in those areas, and then based on the population growth that is happening in the areas. One thing that we did not do in this study is analysis of urban land use changes. Probably we'll do it in coming months or these data sets. We have done only changes to water bodies because our focus, we are working with the irrigation department, so the focus was on surface water availability. So we worked only on that. But then further analyze these things, we have digital elevation data available with both NASA and ISRO, where we have here the Indian Space Research Organization has put 23-meter multispectral images and then 30-meter cartosat digital elevation model in open domain. So these help the analysis correlated analysis of digital elevation with multispectral images. We'll be able to probably get instead of surface areas, we'll be able to get volumes of water available and different time periods. And then once we have such analysis available, probably we can tie up with local governments and then link up with now both most of the governments in India are coming up with automatic weather stations, where earlier we had probably one weather station per entire district. Now we are having probably around 40 to 50 weather stations in the place of one weather station. So there is an increase of probably for entire state in 10 districts now they'll be having around 1,000 weather stations in the place of earlier 20 or 25 weather stations. So the multi-fold increase in availability of weather data in India. So that also helps in collaborating with local government, geotagging those weather data, and then probably analyzing uh, rainwater uh, with correlation of rainfall with water availability in those areas, and then suggest government or farmers to go for suitable crops based on the rainfall. Also, their government is coming up with something called FPOs, Farmer Producer Organizations, which are like self-help groups of women self-help groups that are uh, very useful in changing the economics of marginal uh, economical groups or marginal money earning groups in India. Now, with similar things, similar self-help groups, farmer producer organizations are coming up in India where farmers will form as a community, and then instead of for them, water is the economy. They'll be managing their own local resources, local water bodies, and then for them these kinds of tools where local decision making can help them, which are cost effective, will be of very useful. So these further enhancements to these kinds of studies, probably systematizing them or automating some of these processes, will help farming communities for better utilization of these data sets and analysis. So thank you. um, I'm open for.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. It has
yeah,
been
thank you.
very interesting. There are two questions. Do you
Yeah,
plan to give training to the local governments with GVC?
yeah. Uh, we are currently working with local government in local state government, where we are trying to do three things. One is analysis of vector data that is available, the cadastral maps that are available with government. And then second thing is to update those cadastral maps with some of the tools that they already have. Third thing is to do this kind of analysis, which would be hydrological analysis or raster analysis, which can be easily done with GVC. So all these three things put together, hydrological analysis, raster analysis, and managing vector data, we are planning to hold a series of workshops for all the minor irrigation engineers, who are around 500 people in the state. So that will happen around in some 6 months of time. It will happen.
Okay.
So we're
Uh,
going to train.
Thank you very much. And the
Yeah.
other one, have you developed any extra plugin in GVC, or all the work can be done with the current version of GVC?
No, we have done this analysis using the existing tools. We didn't use any extra plugins. Sextant is the one that we have used.
Okay.
That is inbuilt into gvSIG.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you
Thank you.
for your presentation.
Yeah.
And thank you to all the participants for following this webinar. And we invite you to the next webinar in half an hour, more or less. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.